Hi there, welcome back to our Voices and Votes, our special program on the Liang Hui. Nice to see you again. During the two sessions this year, education once again became the buzzword. With the rapid growth of the economy, China's education has struggled to catch up with the pace of the nation's progress and with people's needs. What are the biggest challenges for China's elementary education reform? Why do Chinese parents dislike the idea of lowering workloads for their kids? When can we expect more preschool education and child care facilities to address the supply crunch amid a nationwide push for young parents to have a second child? To discuss these issues and more, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Dr. Wang Yan, Senior Specialist of National Institute of Education Sciences, and Xu Qinduo, Current Affairs Commentator from CRI. That's our topic. This is a dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. The Ministry of Education says it will carry out a series of campaigns targeting private agencies, private educational agencies and institutions that create excessive workload and pressure for teenagers. And this issue has caused a lot of public debates among parents, and even students themselves have been discussing whether it is good for them to have a lot of workload after the formal class education. So what can you tell us about your thoughts as an expert of educational studies?
Well, first, the phenomena of the heavy learning burdens. I think this is originally originated from the Chinese cultural value in education. That also put a lot of emphasis on effort as a factor explaining and determining success. That means people believe hard work will lead to success in study and career. And also the characteristic of the Chinese education system is to keep close track of the students' learning performance. And first of all, by consolidating what students learn in classroom by after-school assignment or homework, and also by regular tests like module-based or midterm or end-term test to check the students' learning progress against the learning objectives. And then when there's problem arise, then there will be the intervention. All is accumulated towards the students' learning burden. And another reason is now with the rise of the living standards, the parents have higher expectations towards the students' learning performance, and they make whatever resources available for investment into students' learning. For example, after-school tutoring, so that they can excel academically, and also they have extra competencies and skills.
It's not just the private educational agencies or institutions. Public schools could also create a lot of extracurricular workloads for the young kids. Now, you are both a journalist and a parent.
Yes.
You went through the period of hardships in terms of primary education. Mm-hmm. Can I have your thoughts very quickly?
Well, I think it's, like when we talk about the workload or the burdens for the young children, it's a general term. For some children, probably they don't have enough to work on. They would say it's easy to me, it's not a problem. But for others, you would see the struggle to finish their homework, the struggle to deal with this extracurricular like training program arranged often by their parents. I think I stress very much the second point just expressed by my colleague here. That is like the parents' awareness about education, about their children's future and the relationship with the current education. I think if you spend like 8 hours or 10 hours on the just textbooks, of course you can get a high score, but is that enough? And the potential of your kids will be somehow ignored. Your kid may be a talented football player, but he or she probably will never have the chance to play football because he or she spends all the time studying like math or Chinese or English.
Well, yeah, you have a lot to say, it seems.
Well, because we're talking about a campaign or the new policy issued by the Chinese government, and if it would be effective to curb such enthusiasm towards the after-school tutoring, and my answer would be yes, because the research shows that to a certain degree, the supply creates demands. there is a lot
Not the other way around. Supply creates the demand. I'm a little bit shocked to.
No, supply also creates demands. That's the result from analysis of the global after-school tutoring, because the providers, the after-school tutoring agencies, they make the products available and also recommend these services to the consumers, and so that they can take advantage of such services. And also the parents find out these kind of products are useful and can make their children excel, perform better. And so they follow suit of their parents or students. And so in that aspect, that means that when the supply reduces, the demand will also decreases. So the learning pressure or learning burden should also reduce.
The United States boasts of the biggest number of laureates, Nobel Prizes, scientists in particular. But so long as I'm concerned, most of these brilliant scientists had a wonderful, pleasant childhood in that they didn't have so much workloads after school. And therefore the question is, Dr. Wang and Qingduo, is it necessary to have so much workload and after-school tutoring to have a wise university student later on? Is primary education, particularly I'm talking about the extracurricular workload, is it so important to prepare young kids for their academic excellence later on? Dr. Wang.
For me, no. The answer is no. I think that mostly children should have a long-term view.
But then why are Chinese parents so crazy?
Because we are looking at the instant success. We want our children to perform the best now, and next week, or next month, or this year. We are not looking at our children's like the lifelong development or career development. That's multiple years.
But don't you think it is the commercial force or driving force of the market that has created the demand?
I think they play a role, as Dr. Wang pointed out. They definitely played a role. Like that's part of the criticism coming from the Ministry of Education. The Minister of Education, he said in the briefing, some of them created such a fantasy or unrealistic expectation for the parents. So they would love to see their children to be successful in the short term with a silver bullet. The problem will be solved. My kids will become one of the best in his class or her class. I think that is really we need to take a hard look at our education, primary education, and as children, as parents and teachers.
Have you ever done any research about the supplementary education in general, Dr. Wang?
Yes, I did actually. I've been involved in a survey both at Beijing municipal level and also at the national level about after-school tutoring. And it's true that after-school tutoring is popular in China, but then there are several categories. The first is subject-based after-school tutoring, like to reinforce the students' learning or studying math and English and Chinese language, etc. And more, the parents and students would also spend more resources and time on extracurricular or competence-based tutoring, for example, painting, arts, and music, martial arts, baseball, etc. And I think a person's intellectual growth actually are linked to both these two aspects. One is the subject-based learning, and then also this kind of like competence-based or arts-related and sports-related learning. And the learning burden also vary from school to school and vary from district to district. I believe some well-educated parents, they know that learning burdens could be detrimental for their children's growth. And I believe more and more parents are aware of such harmfulness of the overburdened learning, so they would choose different forms of the after-school tutoring.
But to my knowledge, much of the supplementary education at the primary level is a result or combination of a parent competition. Parents compete for the performance of their children in the classroom or outside because they feel proud of their children in this way. And this is quite a competition, gets nowhere, I'm afraid. I'm one of those guys who oppose this idea, but I'd like to encourage a debate.
Well, that's right. I tend to agree with that. I would say, if you look at the Chinese education as a whole, I don't blame like primary education or middle school education. I don't see a big problem over there. I do see a bigger problem with our university education, which is far, far behind the developed nations in terms of this academic research, the independence, critical thinking for the students' training. But the primary school and the middle school here in China actually very strong. I think formal class education, school education, I think I would say that's enough with homework.
A simple comparison between India and China would illuminate this embarrassment from a cross-cultural perspective. Elite education or tertiary education in India is much better. Previously, it was much better than in China. I don't know what's happening now, the new reality between the two countries, while primary education in China outperforms India. However, when you look at Wall Street, media industry, and many other international agencies or organizations, it is people from South Asia, particularly those from India, that proved extremely excellent, brilliant in assuming the leadership, in doing the coordination of work. It's because of their elite education and the tertiary education. We have this strong feeling that China has been outperformed in this area in international organizations. Can I have your analysis about such a comparison? I mean, I wonder if you agree to this paradigm.
First of all, I doubt the argument, the point that India outperformed China in primary education because...
No, not primary education, tertiary education.
Tertiary education, I'm sorry. Well, I think we do need solid evidence-based analysis to lead to such results or points. But well, just referring to another example or another research I have been involved in, why international organizations or large multinational companies does Chinese students sometimes are outperformed by their peers from India or other countries. I was told that could be attributed to several factors. The first is the presentation skills. They are knowledgeable. They have a lot of thoughts and ideas.
You mean the Indians?
No, China.
The Chinese?
China, yeah, but they don't know how to express them. Especially in a creative way or effective way.
Let me break in briefly. Perhaps it's because during the phase of either primary or tertiary education, the art of public speech is not an important part of the curriculum.
Exactly.
Chinese students are not educated and trained to deliver very good public speeches, particularly in terms of communicative skills. Yeah,
but communication skills are very important for coordination, management, and also leadership. Another reason is creativity. That's what I was told according to the research.
Because we are far more disciplined than overseas students.
Well, I think the examination-oriented education and also the drill-based training partly contributed to that problem. But now, with the reform moving towards the more competence-based test and also education, they should be improved in the future.
Thank you so much. You are watching Dialogue with Dr. Wang Yan and Mr. Xi Jingdong. We're discussing why extra curriculum, extra class, and excessive workloads have caused a lot of debates in China, and we are doing a discussion in a cross-cultural examination. We'll be back in a short while, but up next, let's take a quick look at the vox pop that we did in the street to solicit opinions from young students themselves. Welcome back. Before we took the break, after the first part of the discussion, one of my questions was actually about why Indians outperform the Chinese in international organizations. You seem to not have finished your answers so about why poor qualifications for the Chinese applicants. Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Well, I would like to take an example that once I asked the question to the Vice President of the World Bank in charge of human resources management, and what are requirements for human resources of such international organization like World Bank, and the answer I've got, I remember, is number one, well-trained. That means regardless of the expertise area that you are in, then you have to have received very rigorous training so that you can perform well in that professional area. The second is you have to be open-minded. That means in a multicultural environment or setting, you are dealing with people from different cultures and races and countries that they speak differently and they think differently and even dress differently. Don't think that they are crazy or weird. They are colleagues, then only think they are colleagues and be empathetic of the way of thinking and understand what they are doing. You can be colleagues and achieve something together.
Well, thinking of Chinese kids has been tailored and shaped coercively through draconian discipline on the level of a primary education so that they can say yes very easily instead of no. Well, having said this, let's look at the preschool education. We've discussed this a little bit earlier, but elementary education, we tend to adopt a exam-oriented education instead of preparing young kids for qualifications. Taking mathematics as an example, you have of course, Dr. Wang, you spoke of the competence-based skills. Much of the education extracurriculum has been designed to shape competence. But what else can you tell us about the challenge aspect? I'm not talking about the fulfillment itself.
The challenge of the too much focus on the knowledge. Is that your question?
Yes.
Well, I think there are several driving forces behind it. The first, as I said, the Chinese culture, value, education that we have inherited from the Asian people for thousands of years, and especially Confucianism, that is hard to change. The second is our examination-oriented system. That has been changed and improved incrementally and gradually over the past few years. For example, the cancellation of the midterm examination in primary schools, as far as I know, so that the decrease of the number of examinations or tests in the primary education would help. And then another driving force is ultimately is the college entrance examination and also the entrance examination into the lower secondary and upper secondary that require or expect to receive to enroll the better performing students by all kinds of tests. But now with the change or cancellation of some of the tests, I believe this also be improved.
Preschool education refers to kindergartens, private and public. Former Minister of Education, former Vice Minister of Education said at a press conference that the government is ready to spend more time and resources on the establishment of public kindergartens, because these days we've had many embarrassing front-page stories about abusive behavior of the teaching staff of private kindergartens. Taking the scandal of RYB education as an example, it caused a scathing criticism from parents because they are afraid their children may have been severely abused, and some of the teachers were indeed brought to justice on charges of abusing or molesting children. What do you make of concerns of young parents?
I think their concerns are legitimate. I think it's a problem of management, probably for particular private education institution. And secondly, of course, people will come to another issue, that is the selection or the hiring of the teachers. Are they really qualified or fully qualified to take care of the kids in the kindergarten? If you look at the Chinese situation, I would say there's a lot of room for us to improve on the situation. And we have probably abundance of college graduates, but few people would love to teach in the kindergarten. But if you look at the situation in Denmark, you are required to at least have a master's degree to teach in the kindergarten. Mm-hmm. I think that helps in the overall situation in terms of how to take care of the kids over there.
We have tons of questions to criticize Japanese colonialism of Taiwan, which lasted for half a century. Mm-hmm. And yet one of the two most important things that the Japanese authorities took to Taiwan was best teachers from Japan for the primary education and perhaps for kindergartens. Now that impressed me, if not shocked me, a lot. Today, you go to Taiwan, you have a strong feeling that there are strong pro-Japanese sentiments among the young people. I thought very hard and tried to figure out why, until I was wondering aloud, until a professor from a university in Taipei came up to me and said, it's most probably because of the results of the Japanese colonial education, particularly in terms of primary education. So this reminds me of what happens in our neighboring country, Japan, the primary education, even elementary or preschool education. Can you tell us more about Japan?
Well, I don't much research into the Japanese education in details, but internationally speaking, or if we look into the education in a global context, we always say the first is the teacher. The quality of the education system will never exceed the quality of the teachers, so teacher count. And then in Japan, we all know that the teacher is a profession that people have utter respect towards. And even primary school, they have the teachers with the qualification at the university. But and then also the salary is higher, but compared with China, I mean, there is still much room to improve. According to our current law or regulation, the expectation towards the teacher's qualification of primary school is relatively much lower, and I would expect that we also expect required or expected qualification required for the teachers drawing on the experiences of Japan.
What do you make of the poor qualifications of teachers in the kindergarten in China, and why do they fail to get enough respect?
Well, I think, of course, like if you are not the one of the top teachers, usually you get little respect from parents. I think that's very practical, pragmatic on the parents' side. And if you look at the private institution, we are talking about the kindergartens, the private kindergartens, and then remember that's a for-profit activity, for-profit behavior. That's investment from somebody, from a company. Their purpose is to make money. It's not really. That's why the education minister are talking about like increasing the percentage of a public institution, public kindergartens, like to 80–85%. Obviously, there's a lack of that.
Another thing that embarrasses China and the Chinese parents, decision makers in the field of education, is we have millions of left behind the children in rural areas with the tidal waves of migration from underdeveloped regions to the prosperous coastal areas and urban areas in particular. Now, what's going to happen to the left behind the children? There's a serious imbalance in terms of educational resources between urban areas and the rural areas. Will this be quickly fixed with the new generation of Chinese leadership being more aware of the challenges?
Well, there are several reforms relating to the education for migrant children. It is a challenge, indeed. The number one is, also according to the international comparative study, the students' learning performance from poor families or lower socio-economic status are 3 times lower than their peers from the higher economic and social status. So the migrant children, given their from mostly the economically speaking developing areas, so their academic performance could be lower. And then in terms of the budget, the recent reform is previously it is the host government. That means where the children have their hukao, household registration, to be responsible for the education expenditure of the migrant children. But now, with the new regulation, this budget could be transferred to the place where the migrant children receive the education. That means that will create more opportunities for them to receive education in other places. And previously, there are also requirements for migrant children to have multiple certificates to get access to public school. But now this has also been simplified and will be more and more simplified in future. So they can not only have access, but easier access to more choice of the public school in the future.
Mm-hmm. I would say it's not only an education problem, it is also, as kind of like a result of China's rapid economic growth and also urbanization. Parents left the countryside. Basically, if you look at the countryside, we use a word like hollowed out. Mm-hmm. There are children, young children, and seniors left behind. And then, there's a lack of proper daily care for these children, not to mention their academic studies over there. And of course, if you are from the poor area, and of course, the investment in education in the schools and also teacher salaries are usually much, much lower, much, much smaller than, say, in the urban area. And as a result, the situation would be, that's why we're talking about
and I believe part of the poverty alleviation campaign that President Xi Jinping vows to should include the reduction of illiteracy as well as a sufficient supply of food for lunch the children should have in the underdeveloped rural areas. With that, we come to the end of this edition of Dialogue, focusing on primary education and the plight that left behind the children are facing. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.